December even, because we are very dedicated. And nice background, Rob. So what we're talking about today is we have a special guest today who's Jessica Adine or Adine?
Adine.
Adine. Okay. Jessica Adine, who is the acting city engineer.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So as people who have been following this committee know, and as the committee knows, we've been working pretty extensively on walk and roll audits throughout the city of Athens. Rob, over the summer, was able to go out with his Zoom account and take a look at all the streets and sidewalks around. I'm on a call, kids.
Turn around, Louise. No, turn around.
Okay, turn around, which is they're riding a broomstick right now. Yeah, we've been doing that, and then we had a couple other things on the agenda we wanted to get through. To start off, let's take a look at the minutes from our last meeting. And do we have a motion to approve those minutes? Noah's got it. Do we have a second?
I'll take a second.
Okay. All in favor of approving those minutes? If you could raise your hands and say aye as well. Thank you. All right. Motion passes. Let's go ahead and go down into the second part of the agenda, which is reviewing the walk and roll spreadsheet. So how should we do this? One thing here, I'm going to have to close this door. My suggestion would be to maybe pull up the walk and roll audit tracking and just kind of share it. How does that sound?
Sure.
Okay. Could Rob, do you want to open it and share it from Google Docs?
We can have to dig it up. Diane, do you have access to it quicker than I do? I have to look for it. So
I might have to look for it too. Hold on a second.
Okay, let's see who gets to it first, and then we'll just kind of show.
Do you want the Google Docs itself? Okay. Instead of what we sent. Let's see.
Okay.
I think I got to it first, maybe.
Right. Well, yeah. And you can share your screen if you wanted to.
Okay.
You have it?
I don't have it up. But.
So this is just a...
Got it, but it's loading slow. There we go.
Okay. And so this is just like a cover page for the report. These are at least some of the people who worked on it. I think we have most of the people who worked on it. And then we went just through, I don't know if you've seen this, Jessica, but we went through like each section. So, there's like a map of which section of each street that we did. And we tried to take some pictures and have like a really focused look. So you can see like this is a protruding object right here. This picture off to the right, that someone who is blind using a cane might like trip over, or, also a lot of like changes. A lot of changes in like topography. You can kind of see like in this picture that there's some water that was running across in front of the curb cut. We made some recommendations on planners and just kind of really went through in depth. But then we also, and I don't want to spend like a ton of time on this, but I want to then just kind of focus in on what we sent to you, Jessica.
Okay, thank you. Diane did send me the document, and it's very thorough and very useful terms of identifying the problems and something we can use for planning improvements and working with the code office where we need to.
Great. Yeah, and so as projects near completion, what we were kind of thinking is that it could be used as like a checklist to make sure that things are accessible. And what is the process that the city does right now to kind of like, as a project is nearing completion?
So for the larger projects, like the recently completed Richland Avenue project, we go through a final punch list with the contractor, but to make sure that there are no items that need to be corrected. But during construction, there's an on-site inspector who ensures that they're constructing to ADA standards.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I can speak on this, but does someone want to talk about like what we found on the crosswalks on Richland, especially where it's crossing Court Street? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Before we get to that, one more, just to clarify one thing. I think that maybe the right way to use this is we also had another document. I think we pulled information out of this that were like general recommendations, sort of overarching.
Right.
That I think is the thing that one should be, the city should take and try and figure out how to include that in the information they provide for requirements to contractors for projects. But it also could be used as a checklist too, for that punch list to make sure things are covered as expected for accessibility. I think that this list that Davey was just showing with the details is something maybe could be provided to the contractor or whoever is doing the design for the project, so that they can make sure they're covering all the fine details. Because we did cover a lot of detail here that I think would help anyone who's trying to come up with a design for how to, improve the streetscape for these streets as part of this project. So that's sort of my idea on that, how this could be used. With the overarching recommendation to something is that in a separate document, Diane? I think we pulled it.
Yeah, we did both. We gave both the detailed document and the general document. And part of what we talked about with the general document was having some kind of accountability at the end if things aren't done, that contractors know in advance that they will be responsible for fixing it. Because sometimes we would see projects that would get finished, and even though we'd brought up issues before they started, when they would be finished and they still weren't accessible, it seemed like nobody went back and got it fixed. So it would be putting into the RFPs something that states if this is not completed to ADA specifications, then contractor will be responsible for fixing it. And that piece, I don't know that we've ever really known if that happens or not.
Yeah, and just as like a general like case in point is what we want to prevent is when the crosswalks were redone, crossing Union Street, crossing Court Street, when it was poured, it is not done to ADA guidelines. There's about an inch lip on the end of the curb cuts, which makes it inaccessible and kind of dangerous at times too, which is something that we have later on the agenda. So, and I know like when the contractor was originally like, I think they poured the sidewalk and there wasn't a curb cut crossing Court Street. So yeah, and then they went back and fixed things, but it wasn't like completely and totally like done to ADA specifications. So that's what, we're trying to avoid and kind of working on towards the future. And I'd like to bring up those recommendations where I'm having trouble finding those on my email. Oh, here we go. Audit summary report. Let me see which one this is. Okay, so I think this is the overarching comment. Let me pull it up. So this is the final kind of report. Is that right, Diane?
Let me see. Yeah, I think that's it.
And then, yeah, just as we go through, Jessica, some of the things are also, kind of like starting to make things like standard. So like when curb cuts are made, that the truncated domes are pointing towards, the next curb cut. Because I know some people who are visually impaired or blind may use that to get across. We talked about having like a lag time. So if someone needs a little extra time to cross the crosswalk, how to do that. We also made a recommendation for having, because I think bricks are such like a major part of Athens, and I guess that's like a stylistic choice. But one good option that I think may work is having concrete paved or stamped concrete instead of bricks for crosswalks, because I think that's like, again, bricks, students may try and like take them when they leave, or they may like turn or twist, and it creates some hazards for sure.
Okay.
What are some other highlights that people wanted to note?
Well, one question I would have maybe for Jessica, was there anything in here that didn't seem clear?
No, I nothing stood out. It's not clear. There were definitely things that would help if we worked with code enforcement on like some of the parking requirements and some of I think there were some recommendations for trimming back shrubs and entrances to buildings. I thought those were all be items that we could work with code on.
Yeah, I agree. And we have met with David Riggs in the past, and we would like to, again, to kind of go over this with him as well. So we can invite him to one of our upcoming meetings. Yeah, so let's just go through some specifics really quick that I think are important to get right on this project.
Okay.
The upcoming project, especially, so one of the major stumbling blocks right now to accessibility in Athens are curb cuts, especially the one on State Street and Court Street.
Okay.
The ones, the elevation of the slope of the curb right now is just really difficult, and some of the cross slopes are pretty bad. And especially the one that you like get up to Casa, like the Casa side of the street.
Okay.
Jessica, that was one when I measured it for the slope, I fell over into the street. It was steep.
Very steep. Okay.
Yeah, I remember I just looked across the street because I was taking pictures of the other side, and Diane just fell over.
I just rolled right over.
Yeah, and so some of the things that we were thinking is if we're able to kind of like elevate the street in that area, do you think that's within the scope of this project?
I don't think a change in the profile was something we had in mind, but we don't have a designer on board yet, and we haven't gone through the entire scoping document for the project. So I'm glad that you brought it up because we can note it as a potential to look at during design.
Okay, great.
And-
yeah.
and
that's kind of the whole-
Jessica, I'm sorry, David. Jessica, is it clear what we mean by that? That elevation part? Like in our minds, what we were discussing during that part is more like kind of envisioning larger speed bumps almost that kind of pop up, flatten, and go back down. One, it would help with accessibility at the crosswalk, but then also it's kind of nice to include in terms of like slowing down that traffic in that area too. So it's kind of what we were thinking.
So something similar to a raised intersection.
Or just a raised crosswalk.
Yeah, just the raised crosswalk.
Functions sort of like a small speed bump even. It doesn't need to be raised a whole lot, but it could help with some of the access and cut down on the slopes when you get across the street and meet the next curb. To reduce that slope, if the crosswalk's raised a little bit, it can help reduce that slope for the ramp to get up the other side.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it just would be a traffic calming measure that I think would be useful.
Okay.
You know, the bricks help a little bit with traffic calming, right? But even on Court Street, people travel pretty quick on that street, surprisingly fast for how rough it is in places. But I think that the slightly raised crosswalk would be useful, especially on Court Street and these cross streets where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and in addition to those points that we've already made, we were also thinking that could also help with the water problems too around the crosswalks, because we realized that maybe we can't move storm drainage, but if there is the potential to move the storm drainage a little bit away from the crosswalk, that would make the most sense. But if it's just really not feasible, that maybe by raising it also would help prevent that buildup of water and with the drainage problems.
Okay, that's definitely something we can take a look at.
So let's just kind of go through here. In terms of the intersections, we did talk about installing talking signals for crossing the streets, especially around the major intersections. So that would, if you push a button, then it would tell you like, okay, now it's time to walk. We were trying to figure out options for how to make it talking when needed, or just, have it talking in a way that it wouldn't cause a lot of like noise pollution or additional like sensory overload for people on the autism spectrum as well. So we were kind of trying to find like a balance there. Anything else that people want to add on intersections?
No, but Jessica, have you seen other places that have accessible intersections with sound, how they work? Have you seen any models that you think would work well in Athens?
Oh, I have seen models, and I know this was something that Andy Stone had started looking at for I believe the Union crossing area.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have done some research in-house over what would work at that location. I think it could be applied to other locations too, but we have not implemented one yet. I think we are hopeful to with the grant, so it's something that we'll look at with that.
Great, thank you.
Another major thing that's under sidewalks here is oftentimes there's driveways that extend over pedestrian sidewalks, and then the sidewalks cross slope increases dramatically just in that section, kind of like making it inaccessible. So the sidewalks cross slope during those driveways should just mirror the sidewalk instead of being different than the sidewalk.
That definitely makes sense.
Sidewalk furniture. It's really exciting to see some of the sidewalk furniture, the planters and the benches kind of increase some accessibility, I think. But oftentimes, and this is some feedback we got from JW and other people, that if it's kind of spaced and if it's put in different places, people don't know what to expect and can end up walking into it.
Okay.
So putting it on, the side where the further from the buildings is better.
Okay.
And not next to accessible spaces or routes. And then protruding objects, we definitely noted a lot of things that were kind of protruding. Any particular things to note that people wanted to mention?
And there are ways of sort of building in something around them so that people can know that they're there and walk around them. So either putting plants or putting something that if you bumped into it, you wouldn't fall over.
Okay. That's good guidance.
Yeah, and I think if there's something like at head or like body level, that there's also something at foot level too to direct people around it.
Right.
Yeah, the gas piping stood out to me because there are some gas meters and gas piping, and I hadn't thought about it before. But that's something to be aware of.
Sure, and now we're on to accessible parking. There have been a lot of ADA accessible spots that have been added over the last 5 years. I think a lot of that's been work that NOAA's done with the city. And I think the issues now, there are spots, but a lot of the spots have curbs that are too high.
Okay.
And just to increase accessibility, if we're widening sidewalks and decreasing some of the size of the roads, there's some opportunities to make some of the parking spots even more accessible. So this is where stripes can even be put on the left side of the vehicle so that someone who drives using a wheelchair but doesn't use like an electric wheelchair like Noah and I, but rather they like reach behind them, grab their manual wheelchair, put it down, and then transfer themselves out of their vehicle, then would be able to use that spot as well. So we're hoping for a spot or two like that.
Okay.
Also, a lot of contractors, whenever they do put in accessible parking spots, put in spots that do not meet ADA guidelines. They're often way too narrow, or they are missing the lines that allow vehicle access and exit. Anything else for accessible parking?
The only other thing we thought of was when, I think we mentioned it in here too, for places like in front of Passion Works, where the sidewalk is pretty wide, that there might be some opportunity for creating a sort of indentation for the parking so that people can exit and enter more easily. So if the street is wide enough and the sidewalk can be wider, it can give you sort of an indentation to work with.
Okay.
Yeah, and the one thing that I remember from this section coming up time and time again was just making sure that where there are accessible parking, that the plantings in particular are not in the same space as the ADA spots, because a number of those parking spots were right where there was a tree planted, for example. So
better planning.
Yeah, that was the case on some of the, I think one of the newer, maybe two of the newer spots had trees planted to the side of them. And then building entrances, I think right now we're probably at like, I don't know, like 50% or less of building entrances uptown that are accessible. And I'd say probably like out of the spaces that we looked at, on this particular project, only maybe like 40% were accessible for someone using a wheelchair. So one thing that we thought could be really beneficial, and a lot of these places are, again, just like one step or two steps, provide a ramp. So a ramp that just, comes out and goes along the side of the building. Or secondarily, there could be, if the sidewalk is already on a pretty decent slope, just starting a ramp, like doing like a 2-tiered sidewalk almost. And there's models of that seem really promising. But yeah, I think as we do like streetscaping projects and sidewalk projects, that's a real opportunity to make more buildings accessible.
Yeah, and as an example, that two-tiered sidewalk, Pittsburgh has done quite a bit of that recently with the rebuilds. They've had a lot of revitalization going on of old neighborhoods in Lawrenceville, for example, if you're familiar with Pittsburgh. And they've created a sort of a 2-tier, and I can show a brief example if you'd like to see that.
Yes, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just put it on the screen for a second here if I have the ability to share. Let's see.
I think you do.
All right. So can you see that example there? So this one has cones on it still because it wasn't completed. So it was a brand new one. And there's another view of this from the other side. So you can see the ramp going up. I think they intended to put railings on this, I believe.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's why there's the cone still, or the barrel still. There's I didn't see it handy, but there's a couple more examples like this. And this exact design isn't really necessary. There's different ways to do this, but this is one way. And they have the same problem, as you can see, that we have in Athens with buildings that have step-ups to get in, and this is a way to solve that problem. But it does mean that you have to have a wide enough walking space to work with to build something like this at 2 levels.
Right.
So that's one possible solution of many, but just an idea out there to try and help fix some of those, because the businesses and the building owners really can't fix it. It's really the sidewalk that's often ultimately the issue. So it would be really a redesign of the streetscape that would solve the problem potentially. Let me unshare.
Thank you for bringing that photo up, Rob.
You're welcome. And I could, if you want, Jessica, I could send you a couple more photos. I've got a couple other examples if I dig them up that I could send to you to give you some ideas of what the possibilities might be and what seems to be working other places, like Pittsburgh in particular. I've been there quite a bit since my wife's family's from there.
Okay, thank you.
I had a thought too. Jessica, do you work with the business owners as you do these projects? Yes.
And for the upcoming project in the Uptown area, we would absolutely be working with the business owners, because I know there are problems, in that area that we would want to resolve using something similar to the tiered sidewalk.
And one of the sort of temporary solutions some places do that maybe you could just pass on to them is that if they have some kind of signage in their window saying call this number or text this number to have somebody come help you. Okay. Like if they needed something in that building or space, so that people still have access to their services even if they can't get in until they can get in.
Okay.
And just being realist, like some businesses are up like 14 stairs and it's impossible to get in. Like I think the subway maybe,
okay,
or like Insomnia Cookies, like that's possible. But having a sign or a button to press that someone could come out and connect what you need done would be great. But then there are so many other places that try and do their best. And sometimes those are accessible, and sometimes it just doesn't work as well. So using that sidewalk is great. Anything else for building entrances? Did I hear you saying something, Tiffany?
No, not for this one.
Okay. Let's go on to bike and scooter parking.
I had one other thought on building entrances. I don't know that we came across in this audit, but it's that did we write in that some of the spaces have sort of a cross slope to get in, even if it's accessible? It makes it not accessible. So if you, like the bank that's on the corner of Court and Washington, I think, is that, Davey, is that the one that had like a leaning entrance to get to the push button to get into the space?
Right. Yeah, I think it's the Chase Bank.
Thinking about how the entrance needs to be level to get into it safely.
Yeah, like that 60 by 60 kind of pad, so you have room to turn, push a push button to get into the door. Yeah, it can't be on a slope because then you're sitting sideways trying to push a push button to get a door open, and then trying to move out of the way. It just doesn't work. For bike and scooter parking, I think just the prevalence and the abundance of bicycles and scooters. Bicycles are often, tied into parking meters, sometimes accessible ones because those are lower and easier to tie into for people. They're also often tied into ramps for building entrances or to trees. So I think what we really recommend is adding more bike parking and also more scooter parking so that people are able to place their scooters and bikes in certain places, come back to them, know where they are.
Yeah, I think in this in particular, JW was talking about the rentable scooters and how they're just randomly left all over town. And so you never really know where one of those will show up. And so if you're visually impaired or blind in particular, that poses quite a challenge. And people don't often think about where they're leaving them. They just kind of put them right in the middle of the walkway. So having some place that's designated for those, I know the idea is that they would be wherever throughout town, but having designated spots where you should leave them and then maybe walk the rest of the way to where you're going would be really helpful in thinking about that planning.
Yeah, and Uptown is a perfect example of that. So they were not supposed to ride them through Uptown anyway. So having designated parking areas that are marked, like the university has done, on the edges of Uptown probably makes sense. To and that could be incorporated into this project potentially.
Okay. I'll share that comment with the code enforcement director.
That's great.
Great. And then we already talked a little bit about accountability, but make repairs if specifications are not met. The city will withhold payment and hold contractors accountable until accessibility is addressed. So, yeah, I talked about that, but what other thoughts do people have?
I just in general had a question about accountability. I mean, we've said a number of times, even during this call, that we think that this should be happening, but we're not sure if it is happening. Could you just take a second and talk a bit about what that process looks like?
For the completion of a project?
Yeah.
So as the project is completed and if we find something that needs additional work before we accept it, the contractor does not receive their final payment until that work is repaired. And I think one thing we've learned and one thing we're moving towards is to working on adopting the City of Columbus's standards for our projects. I think they have an ADA coordinator requirement for their construction projects to make sure that maintenance of traffic is set up so that people who do, have, who might need a cane, for example, can sense the traffic control devices correctly. And so that's something we're incorporating. And I know we've added a checklist for ADA ramps to make sure the slope is correct and the lip is the correct height. But for the end of the project, that's the city doesn't make final payment until those issues are addressed. And then there's a year of warranty where if we missed something, we could still go back to the contractor within that year and have them address or correct an issue.
So if somebody notices something after a project's done, would they contact you, or who would
Yes.
they? Okay.
They'd contact me.
Okay.
And those are just for items that were already intended to be completed, correct? Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this is like really helpful to go over with you, Jessica, and to know like what the upcoming projects are. I know Stimson is going to break. Has it already broken ground?
They're working on the installation of a water line between on State Street between Fern Alley area and Stimson Avenue. They'll really start work next year, so the bulk of the improvements on Stimson will be done next year.
Okay. And then what are the other upcoming projects to kind of keep in mind? This is the one that we're talking about now is kind of way in the future, but what are some other ones that are maybe in that other range?
The next major project outside of Stimson is probably West Union Street, and that is slated for 2022. And that we're reviewing designs now. It's mostly a street improvement project, but we are adding a sidewalk sections and a multi-use path and lighting. So that's going through design now through probably mid-year next year, and then it will be advertised and constructed in 2022.
Okay. What kind of accessibility improvements do you think there'll be on that project?
Well, I know we've received a complaint earlier this year about the push button at the crossing for the bikeway. So we did a temporary measure to alleviate that issue, but we'll be looking at that. So adding sections of sidewalk where they're missing on West Union, and making sure the crossings are improved. Right now, the Schaefer Union intersection doesn't have a crosswalk at each leg, and part of the improvements for the West Union project include installing a roundabout at that location. So there'll be better delineated crosswalks for pedestrians. So those are just some of the items, and then increased lighting. But,
Okay. Yeah, and that's a section of Athens that I don't often like walk on with my wheelchair because it's just kind of impossible. So I don't go that way. So yeah, I'll have to take more of a look. So this what are like the start and finish of Union where the work will happen?
it will be the project won't include any work on the bridge at 682, but it will be start just a bit before the bridge. So we won't touch the bridge approach at all, but it is basically from the bridge to the Schaefer Street intersection. And then we are still applying for funding for an access road from West Union Street to State Street via Herald Avenue. So there might be a Herald Avenue extension as well that would be, that would have sidewalks and lighting. if that extension is funded.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Where Schaefer? What are like the businesses close to Schaefer? Just so I can picture it.
It is. It's very close to the cemetery, and it used to be a Hungry Howie site, but now it's an emergency response. I think it's an ambulance.
Okay, so yeah, I know that there's on at least one side of the street there's like steps in the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a challenge, I think, on that section of Schaefer.
Yeah.
Between there and the Cider House or Washington Street, that's a challenge for pedestrians now, and I'm hoping that this project will help address it, but I don't think it can fully solve the problems there.
And we also have, speaking of near the Cider House, the city received a community development block grant for improvements on Washington Street. And that is basically from near the Cider House intersection. And we'd be taking out steps at that crossing location and adding a crosswalk. So we'd be doing some improvements at Schaefer and Washington, and then some sidewalk improvements along Washington. So and that project is closer in terms of construction time frame, but we haven't started planning or design on that. We received the grant earlier this year.
Yeah, and I think we as like a committee are learning. A couple asks that I would like to make personally are if we could see the Columbus ADA recommendations or the ones that the city is adopting.
Okay.
That would be really interesting to look at for us.
Sure, absolutely. It's something that that the engineering department is including in our contract documents for the contractors to follow. But I can definitely send you the link for that information.
Thank you. And then, yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to suggest, I've seen the second design concept, I think, for the West Washington or the West Union project that we're just talking about.
Okay.
I haven't had a time to look at it close. Bob Hetty had sent it to me before he left. And he had asked specifically about looking at he also did a sketch about how it would connect to the roundabout. And I haven't been able to even really get my time to look at it, but I'd like to do that. But I'm thinking it would make sense for us to look at it as a committee.
Okay.
If you could get us the document, or I do have what he forwarded me. I think it's a link to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send you.
And I don't think we need a hard copy. I think we can look at it digitally is fine. I know you've done that for us before, but maybe it's not really necessary. Unless you wanted to sit down with us and, be able to, and we can't really do this now, get together and look at it physically. Otherwise, a paper copy doesn't help a whole lot, so digits is fine.
Okay, yeah, digital is fine. And then if we want to set another Zoom meeting where we can flip through the pages, and I think that would be really beneficial.
Because I think there's a lot of good things in that, but it would be good to look at some details that I think that folks here have a good eye for.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and also you said there's like a smaller community block grant for the Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if we could take a look at that too, if there's any drawings for that. Yeah, it's just really something that I'm curious about, and something that help at all.
All good stuff. There's lots of great things happening. You're doing great work.
Oh,
and it's great to see these projects moving along and getting funding. So that's good.
Washington is awful on that block, especially on the other side.
Yeah.
Yes, I used to live on that street actually when I first got to Athens. My first 6 months here, I lived on the street, and I would have to stumble back from the cider house every night.
That sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm picturing those streets, and I'm picturing I normally walk in the street there because the sidewalks work for me. So that'll be really helpful to have that done.
Okay.
And then the next thing we had on the agenda, and this is one of our goals for next year, I know that there were some concrete like scraping down. I forget what it's called, like grinding maybe, that was done on some of the city sidewalks. And I think that was really successful. But one thing that wasn't done is the crosswalks. The crosswalks still have, as I think we mentioned earlier, some pretty significant lips to them.
Okay.
We were wondering if there would be a way to schedule some grinding these down, especially along the Court Street corridor.
Yes. Yeah. We usually do have some kind of sidewalk improvement component with our annual paving project. And so we can take a look at those areas. I can contact the company that did the grinding and see if they would be able to grind that lip. I can just send them some photographs, see if they could grind that lip, or if we need to remove and replace the ramps in that section, we can also look at that.
Okay, great. Yeah. And a lot of the sections, it's like the curb cut, and then there's like a little piece of concrete that's poured around that as well. And it's often that little piece of concrete that I think could be ground down.
Okay. Well, I will look for specific examples, and you probably have listed some in your walking roll through document, your assessment document.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the ones that jump to mind are, again, Court Street, where it's crossing Union. Those are pretty significant, and those are new. I think those would be pretty easy to grind down.
Okay.
And East State Street, or State Street, where it crosses Court Street as well, are some pretty significant drop-offs.
Okay.
And actually, Washington, where it crosses Court Street, is better.
Okay, that's good to know. I can look at all three locations and then just look around to see what else could be. If we're bringing in a grinder to do that work, what else could be done?
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I think, I think we as a committee would probably do well to kind of review some of the things that you send us and try and meet with code enforcement between now and then. It's David Riggs who's the code enforcement director, right? Okay.
That's correct.
He came to one meeting probably around this time last year. I remember doing it in person, so we'll try and get him.
It was in March.
In March, so it was right before the pandemic, I think.
Yep.
You know, I remember going to that meeting and being like, should I be at this meeting?
Yeah.
It was
Right on the edge. Okay, well, that sounds great. And then I would suggest, what do you think a good time frame would be, everyone?
for what?
For a meeting with Jessica again, I would say maybe April or May.
Okay.
Okay. We'll have a lot of updates by then. So we don't have drawings yet for the Washington sidewalk that I mentioned, but I will send out the Western Union project links and then send the City of Columbus documents. A link to that.
Great. Yeah, and it's always great when you join us, Jessica. Thanks again for joining us. Yeah.
I really appreciate all of the time you spend and helping and assisting with projects and reviewing these problem areas. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think we all, when we get it done as best as we possibly can with what we're working with. So yeah, we really appreciate the city working with us on this.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and personally, I'd like to thank you for your participation here and for listening and taking the time to spend with us.
Oh, well, thank you, Rob. I find it very, very valuable. So I appreciate all the feedback and guidance you've given and all your time to do these audits and assessments and plan reviews.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we can go and cut you loose if you want to head out, Jessica. We're going to talk really briefly about just our goals for the committee for the next year. So
Okay.
You're welcome to.
Well, I guess I'll step out, but thank you again, everyone, and have a safe and happy holiday season and New Year.
Thanks.
All right. You too. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, let's just kind of go through really quickly on what some of I think that's our final part of the agenda today. Our next meeting will be on January 14th. So we decided to invite Jessica. When should we invite David? Should we invite David to our upcoming committee meeting for code enforcement?
Sure.
Okay, let's try and get him for January or February. I can send them an email, and I'll just CC Patty and Steve and Jessica and everyone, just so we're all working together.
Along that line, just excuse me, I was eating a little bit there. Just an update on the Click See Fix app and website adaptation, the implementation the city's done. So it's being utilized by a number of people now. I have a notification anytime there's a new post on it. So I see everything's being posted in the area, and it's getting used regularly. People complaining about graffiti and people parking in the front yard of houses and all the kinds of things that we're used to hearing about on the old app. So it's starting to get use. And one thing we could do, if you want, we could go over that app and review the functionality, see how it works, see if there's any issues we need to talk to the city about, see if there's any additions maybe. It apparently is a more flexible platform, and that's one of the reasons they went with it. It's because they could modify or get modifications done to support new requirements and things like that. So that was a problem with the old app, is there was limitations to what could be done. It was more of a dead end, that there wasn't really development occurring on that platform. So if you want, you can put that on the agenda for a future meeting. We could review that.
Let's look at that in January. I think that would be great. I think one thing we were really able to do as a committee and commission was to push forward the City Source app when that was used. And I think we saw some significant improvements from using that. So yeah, we'll definitely put that on the next agenda. Otherwise, we have, so I think that should be one additional goal that we have for next year is, how do you spell that, Rob?
Click See Fix, just like it sounds. I'm trying to think if it's one word or if that's three separate words, how it's spelled.
See, like the letter?
Or like
it looks like it's often used, both as one word or two word or three words. So it's C Click Fix, SEE Click Fix, and it could be all one word pushed together or three words. Click C Click Fix.
Got it.
Yeah, that's great. And I know we just have a few additional minutes before we close today. One additional thing is I'd like to start with code enforcement using the readily available improvements, ADA improvements list that's available through, I think, the Justice Department or the Department of Justice, if I'm not mistaken, to encourage businesses to do what they can right now to make improvements. And that includes signage, doorways, entrances. And I think we could see some improvement with that. The other things we have on the list are schools. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. cclick.com. So the other things I think as a committee we can continue to work on are diversity and inclusion within our committee. So I think we want to have, a wide variety of disabilities and abilities in our committee. And I think, we definitely want to recruit others to support this work that we're doing. Just inclusion and diversity in general too. So we don't want, just all white people doing it. We want people from a diverse perspective to be within our group. So I want that to be as one of the things that we work on this year. Are there any other goals that people have that we should add on to the list?
The same as what we're doing about being involved with the city projects as they come up. I think that we should continue that with a goal.
Yeah.
I think maybe promoting reporting of issues too, like the See, Click, Fix app. So we should learn more about it and see if we need to talk to the city about improving it if it needs it, but also I think promoting it within the disability community in Athens so that people know it's an option. They can actually report issues that they encounter and how to do that.
What were you going to say, Tiffany?
I just, again, just going back to community engagement, just getting whatever feedback we can, thinking about how we can increase that engagement with the community in order to get additional feedback on things, whether it is something with like the See, Click, Fix, or if it might just be surveys or something else that we might be able to do to try to get community engagement in some way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Trying to publicize and invite more people into this committee meeting, but also, yeah, just surveys. I know Noah has been working on a survey as well. So,
and I think along that line, some walk and roll audits that may be possible when the pandemic is resolved here. Maybe doing some of those too later in the year, or starting to do them again. Might be a good idea. We can then, that's also a way we can show people how to use the app.
Great. All right, well, it is 1:00. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Noah's got it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Rob's got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.